dungeon masters, rats with a dash of sick. I dash like Sonic Mad, not a pacifist, but pacifist the tracks when I'm rapping, kids. We the last of us, the master race. Take him with a master hand, it's cancerous. I hit him with the master sword, and sure I make a nice sword, but I wonder how 4 guys make a Triforce.
Hey guys, welcome to the Trinity Force podcast. My name is Adam Ponophobia Cogswell, and I am your host for this lovely evening, or lovely morning for Chobra, who's sitting in here with us this week.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, night, I guess, for everyone else.
It's always tricky to do
Thank
this
you.
stuff. I have coworkers who work the same shift as I do in Bangalore, and like every morning I'm like, "Good morning." They're like, "What? It's evening." I'm like,
Yeah, right.
"God damn it!"
Yeah.
So if this is
Now
you guys,
I'm-
sorry, if this is you guys' first time tuning into the Trinity Force podcast, we welcome you. We are your League of Legends podcast. We discuss quite a bit of information about the meta, not so much the LCS information. If you want to find that, we do have the LCS T-Force rundown. You can find that at lcs.trinityforcepodcast.com. T-Force podcast, or T-Force proper as we've been calling it lately, is more about meta discussion, champion discussion, listener questions, and anything else in between. So I just want to welcome anybody that might come from Twitter, thanks to Chobra, who had just tweeted that out. Chobra, he has worked with us with GG Chronicle and now working with OGN, and we brought him on this week to have a nice interview and discussion. So say hi again, and we can get this on the road. Oh, hi, puppy.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks to Pone for a quick introduction. I guess the most important thing for people who might not know me right now is that I am, yes, working at OGN, and now as a full-time caster for really anything, although my roots are in League of Legends, of course. So there you go.
Does that mean we're going to hear you in StarCraft here?
StarCraft 2.
StarCraft 2 and
Well, I've done StarCraft before. Yeah, I'll be doing a lot of the Hearthstone stuff with Doa in the future.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Is Doa doing Hearthstone full time then?
So I guess the easiest way to
This is
break
not
it
about
down
you.
right
We
now-
really shouldn't. You really should be answering this.
Well, it's the easiest way to break it down right now at OGN is, now there are 3 of us, all as full-time casters, and Monty will be the, I guess, resident League of Legends commentator, since, he's an analyst, he's a game expert. So he'll be doing both Masters and Champions. I will be casting Masters with him. Doa will, of course, still be casting Champions with him. And then, therefore, for Hearthstone stuff, Doa's kind of the analyst for that game now, and then I'm still just kind of casting and hosting. So we've all kind of divvied up our parts. I've just right away branded myself more as a host and play-by-play caster. Of course, everyone knows and loves Monty as the League of Legends expert. And Doa's kind of like the in-between. Like, I know he loves hosting, he's great at it, but then of course Hearthstone is kind of his home because has such a great history with TCGs and CCGs, so that's how we're divvying up for this year. But who knows what'll happen if if there are more titles that come our way, if more people join the crew, it could all change.
Good. It's good to hear that you guys are able to diversify yourselves once you were out there, because for the last year, it was just Doa and Monty, and then of course you were doing the translating, and now they've brought in a dedicated translator, correct?
Right. Yeah. So last year I was kind of all over the place. People who followed me might know that I was doing a lot of behind-the-scenes production work. I was kind of helping with the marketing too at some points, a little bit of the business portion. And then anything live on the show was mostly just limited to interpreting and translating, which I still, of course, do in any shows that I'm already casting. But just that there are more shows now, there are more broadcasts per week, and not all of us can be at every single one. So OGN did bring on a translator specifically for Champions right now, and then hopefully we'll be able to broaden that spectrum.
So between Masters, Masters was this morning or yesterday for you?
Champions was yesterday.
Champions. I see.
Masters is today. Yeah.
Give me an explanation between the difference between Masters and Champions, because they confuse the hell out of me right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Me too.
So Champions is I guess you could say the Premier League, right? So that's what is relatable to the LCS.
Okay.
That's what are going to give the team circuit points. That's what's going to matter for Worlds. Masters is a completely separate tournament, not at all related to Champions or LCS or Worlds. It's just designed to, I guess, pit organization versus organization, since Korea has so many teams now that have sister teams. So it's going to allow teams like SKT to kind of fight on the same side no matter what. So you don't have to worry about team kills. You can kind of mix and match. We always give teams a chance to mix and match rosters if they want. So that can also create for some fun semi-show matches.
So any of the CJ
then,
guys can jump in between the CJ teams when they're playing.
Yeah, so there's always one
the other organization,
set.
I should say.
Yeah. So there's always one set out of the best of 3
Okay.
that allows the coaches to mix and match rosters. So you could have, fans who are a fan of, let's say, both CJ teams. You can always have a dream team in your mind, and maybe the coaches will make that happen during Masters. Who knows? They don't have to. We don't force them to mix rosters, though, because it is going on at the same time as Champions. And, of course, teams have a practice schedule that they want to keep up with for Champions. But that's the basic breakdown. And then Masters is 2 times a week no matter what. So it's Thursdays and Sundays. And then Champions is the usual schedule of Wednesday, Friday, Saturday during, group stage, and then Wednesday, Friday for the playoffs.
No wonder I can never get a hold of Monty when I email him. Guys casting 3-4 days a week.
Yeah, he'll be really busy in March and April because that's where the group stages are for Champions. So he'll be casting 5 days a week for most weeks.
Okay.
So given the really incredible frequent exposure to Korean League that you get, do you ever just tune into North American LCS and then start laughing at the North American scene and everything? Just oh god, you guys are so far behind on everything in this game. Last hitting, why are you even doing that anymore? We're so past that.
It was there was a glaring difference last year for sure, and I don't watch the NALCS as much live just because of timing. EULCS I catch quite often because it's usually right after our broadcasts, time-wise. So finish broadcast, come home,
a lot closer,
unwind,
and then unwind. Grab a beer, and then I turn on Twitch, and there's there's EULCS. So I'll watch that quite often. Last year there definitely was a very blatant difference between NALCS and Korea's Champions. I think this year's it's gotten a lot better, and I think that's just that's affected rather by team structure in NA. We're seeing a lot more dedicated analysts, coaches, and people living in the houses with the players to help with their lifestyle. I think that helps a lot. I think just also the new teams and players that LCS has brought in NA is actually this part Korea's always been behind is trying new champions, trying new team compositions. I think EU has always been ahead of the curve on that one.
Did we ever see Jinx?
Innovating, right?
In 4-1 and 4-2, did we ever see Jinx? Because I know
in Korea.
Yeah, in Korea. Because I know for a long time that no one was picking her up.
Yeah. So we just did.
In from Samsung. Are we on 4-3 right now?
Now Korea. We're on 4-3.
Okay.
But we saw Jinx in 4-2.
Okay, that's what I was asking because I know in 4-1 and 4-2 North America and I think Europe more specifically was playing Jinx. And we kept hearing people why isn't Korea picking up? And they were well, they really like Vayne, they really like Ezreal, they like people with escape, some mobility. And Jinx, they didn't feel that Jinx had that.
Yeah, Korean teams are pretty stubborn. And obviously they're correct. Jinx doesn't have an escape. But she has a place in the game that you could work around. And this is what we saw with Korea last year too, though, is that they will always wait until teams in EU or NA have shown enough games with a new champion or with a new item build to then perfect it themselves. Of course, there are instances where Korean teams have come up with some ideas, such as now the tier is back, so who knows if we'll see it again. But way back when we had people like Shy have an 18-minute fully stacked tier. That was, of course, kind of Korea leading the way in top lane tier champions. But most of the time, they'll wait because they like to play it safe. And whenever I talk to Korean coaches or players, their answer is always, assume you're playing a best of 2, a best of 3, especially within Korea. You always have to assume they're going to come out with the safest team composition so that you don't take a risk. You might go with a one-off, cheese or a surprise strategy, but rarely do you want to have to build your team around a certain champion, because what if then you have to have so many plan Bs and Cs for picks and bans that you should always just go with the safest composition.
So each champion, the mentality you're saying then is each champion should be safe so that they can independently perform without relying on
Yeah.
their other champions. Okay,
I feel like that's how
makes sense.
TSM has been playing recently. They've been picking the safest lanes that they can and the safest.
Almost
That's
infuriatingly
probably
so.
why they're number one.
Right. But I mean,
In
how
the NA.
many games did Dyrus, for example, play with Mundo in the top lane? And even when
Yeah.
after the nerfs between the Masters, everything came through, he's still playing it because it's a safe pick, and as you explained. So
Right.
while I do want to talk more about the Korean teams and talk about what you know about the Korean teams and how that the culture is over in Korea, but I do want to focus on you for a little bit. So what we know about you is you originally are from California, right? Or you were based in California for OGN?
All over the place. I was last seen in the USA on the East Coast.
Okay.
In New Jersey and New York
East
City.
Coast.
I couldn't
There you
remember
go.
where you were because the last time that we had actually sat down and talked, it was around it was season 2 Worlds. That's the last time that you and I actually sat down and talked because you were it was the finals, not the finals matches, but like the quarterfinal matches, the group stage matches for Worlds.
Yes.
You were doing all the interviews, and I was getting the videos and putting them together. So I think the last time that Cho
that
and I
was
actually
season
sat down and
2.
talked. Right.
Wow. Yeah, that's a while.
Yeah,
ago.
that was definitely the last time I worked with you on anything. So
Right. So you were working with GG Chronicle at the time. Why don't you tell us how you came? You started League of Legends. You did whatever you were doing, went to GG Chronicle, then went to OGN. Why don't you kind of give us a breakdown of how you became Will Chobra of OGN?
All right. Well, I guess we can kick things off with so as is true with most students in college, I was totally clueless on what I wanted to do. I was studying political science, which I had grown to hate by that time. So I decided, I didn't want to graduate and then be labeled as unemployed. Like I just hated the concept of having to fill out forms and be like unemployed. And so I was like, well, I could work around that if I just take a leave, and then I could still argue that I'm a student with 1 semester left. So I came out of school, just took a break, and I've always played a lot of games. I've been an amateur FPS player before, and I was playing a lot of League and Dota 2 at the time, so I said, all right, well, I always want to try my hand at broadcasting. Put 2 and 2 together. That's exactly kind of when NA eSports was kicking off again, especially for the PC world. So I just took that as a chance. I started mostly just I signed up for any amateur online tournaments I could for League of Legends. Whenever people were like, we need a caster, even if it's just for 1 day, I'd be like, all right, sign me up. I'll do it no matter what time.
That's what you're doing.
yeah, you did dominate
yeah.
Dominion for a while, even.
Yeah, so that's a story too, because I had never thought.
Sorry,
about
that just
Dominion.
kind of hit me.
Yeah, it's fine. That's kind of integral to the part, because before that, I had always just done one-offs, and then I started. I tried to start some shows here and there. I started the Pentacast organization that some people might know of, that does like Riot versus Community show matches. So that's what I was doing. Wasn't really getting much in terms of regular tournament casting. And then I was asked to sub in for Dominate Dominion one day. I was like, all right, well, I've never casted Dominion. I've played it now and then. I've never casted it before. So I casted one day, and then one day became 2. And then just became a regular thing. I got used to it. I actually loved casting it. It's what it really meant for me, other than me liking the game mode in general, was that you really can't write anything off. A lot of people just look at Dominion. They're like, oh, well, it's different game time, or there's not as much depth. And that might be true if you list it all down. But when I was talking with the guys who were playing at a high level, just things I would have never imagined. It was as if, the first time you're watching, say, one region, and then you see a team that's like the best of another region, say, namely right now, Korea. So if it's your first time watching, say, SKT T1K, it's an eye-opening experience. They do things and they know things about the game that other people may have never imagined. And that's what I was learning when I was casting Dominion. So that was cool.
When you were casting Dominion, real quick, did you ever notice any of those games that froze at like 5 or 10 points, then they came back and won?
Oh yeah,
and then the
I
casters get all excited and
yeah. My
games.
favorite game is still one where the final score was 1-0, so it was a
Wow.
1-point win. Yeah,
That's
it was like a
awesome.
comeback at the last 15, 20
That's
points.
exciting. That's what I
It
like
was
about
crazy.
Dominion.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, we actually had the feed ski on.
It
Oh,
was like
nice.
2 months ago at this point. But
Yeah, it was like I think it was January 28th. I think that's about the
All right.
time it was. It was the end. But we had the feed ski on and we talked Dominion, and we're actually we're big proponents of Dominion here on the Trinity Force podcast. We try to get as many people as we can into it because it's a really fun game mode once you break it down. And now that you've casted it, you've played it, you understand how much more in depth the game mode is than capture the bases and back cap.
Yeah, definitely. There's just also, I think the best example that people who don't play Dominion as much was when I first got in. They were like, "All right, a few key tips. You're going to notice that players aren't going to cap their, the nearest points right away." And I was like, "Why does that make sense?" They're like, "Because that affects your spawn time, because that's how the game determines if a team is ahead or not, and they adjust spawn time for you that way." So sometimes people will intentionally cap their first point a bit later, so that way they don't have to use a revive for the first team fight up at the windmill. And I was like, oh wow, I don't even know how people would have figured that out, but that's good to know on my first cast. So there are tons of more things like that. So that was fun. And Feeski's great. Feeski's a great guy. So
He's a great guy.
Dominate Dominion was, I guess, my first regular gig in terms of casting. And then the whole professional aspect of everything really kicked in when the MLG Summer Arena happened, back when we still had a lot of League of Legends stuff going on at MLG, and that was when Azubu Blaze, now CJ Entis Blaze, got invited to come play against teams like Curse with their roster at that point, TSM.
oh yeah, Team Black was there.
Yeah, Team Black.
I remember
yes.
that. Right.
Yeah. So
Oh, and Monty
That-
did that interview with the
Oh
pillow.
God, I was not going to bring it up. Right.
yes, that famous interview is from that weekend. That was great.
I remember he did.
So-
He couldn't live that down for the longest time.
I
Yeah,
forgot
that's,
about it until just now.
That was a.
Sorry, Monty, if you're listening, but
It was pretty funny. It's the pillow interview at the time. So this is the first time I'm meeting anyone there, including Monty. So I just went as a fan because at that point I was living in Jersey out of school, and the event was in New York City, of course, where the MLG headquarters are. So I just thought I thought back to when my friend had ran into StarCraft programmers for the StarCraft arenas in New York City, and my friend was telling me, I was just like walking around K-Town, I ran into StarCraft players, just hung out with them for a little bit. I was like, all right, well, you know what, might as well try my chances. I really want to meet Azubu Blaze. Of course, the other teams too, but at that time, I would have never imagined I would fly out to Korea to work for League of Legends, and esports content. So to me, it was like, well, this is maybe the only chance I might get to meet people like Azubu Blaze. So I decided, I'd give whatever shot I had to go see them, and MLG Rally was coming around the corner. So MLG was also having a sweepstake event for, show that you're the ultimate fan of Dr. Pepper and MLG, and then you might win a trip to MLG Rally. So I said, all right, well, you know what, do both at once. So the story goes that, foolishly enough, I wake up in the morning, I decide I'm going to do this, and so my idea to show, I guess, that I'm the ultimate fan was to drink Dr. Pepper all day. This was one of the best and worst mistakes of my life. So I decided to vlog myself drinking Dr. Pepper all day on my search for the MLG headquarters office, and then meeting the players. And
Nice.
at the time, like I couldn't find the MLG office address anywhere, but Saint Vicious had actually just tweeted a picture he took from the office. He was like, "Oh, we're here. We're gonna play in the
Okay.
arena." And he posted a picture. I'm like, "All right, well, there's the Empire State Building," and I'm like,
Nice.
"Should be right around here." So it's gonna be
Doing
like
some
a couple blocks.
Oh my
away.
God.
level shit.
Terrain association.
Straight up
Nice.
stalking.
So I did this through Twitter.
Good
So
CSI.
yeah, so I said, all right, well, I know the neighborhood, so I buy my Dr. Peppers. I'm vlogging myself going into the city, and then I decided, you know what, if I'm going to meet Azubu Blaze, might as well make some signs for them, because Obviously, they're not going to have like any fans there. I figured because it's not a spectator event to begin with, and then they're also the team from Korea. So I was like, all right, well, might as well give them like a nice welcoming poster. So I go into the city, go buy some like poster material, sit down at McDonald's, drinking Dr. Pepper, drawing a poster for Azubu Blaze. All these people staring at me. I'm like, don't even care. Doing this for esports. And then I go to the neighborhood around where I figured the office was, and I start asking around. And then a couple of people actually happened to know. So they were like, oh, it's that building over there. So I go to the building, and of course security won't let me up because it's not a spectator event.
Of course.
So I'm like, all right, you know what? I can hang out in the lobby though. So I'm just gonna hang out in the lobby
Drinking Dr. Pepper.
until the event. Drinking Dr.
And
Pepper.
flogging
That's
yourself.
key.
You got to make
And
sure you
flogging
continue.
myself. And so I just waited until all the games were over because I'm like, well, now I have you guys cornered. Like everyone has to leave this building at some point, so I'm gonna run into all the people I want to meet. And so I got to meet Team Black first, and then On Air, who's still the head coach of the CJ Entus teams back then, of course, Azubu teams. On Air and Reaper came down for a break, and they saw me. This guy, and I was gross at the time, by the way, because it was so hot. It was the hottest day of summer that year in New York. And I'm
you
like
did
standing
nothing but
outside in the
drink Dr.
humidity,
And you're jittery on Dr. Pepper.
Exactly. I drank nothing
You're
but
sweating
Dr.
sugar.
Pepper. It was actually gross. This is why it was the worst mistake of my life
Smelled
because
like
I'm
BO.
drinking. Yeah, I'm drinking Dr. Pepper on the hottest day, and and they just see me with this sign so they can see I'm there to meet them. They're like, oh, like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I live nearby. I'm just a fan. I really like your team.
I'm assuming
Figured
you're speaking
I'd-
Korean the entire time. As
Right,
this is
yeah.
going.
I was speaking Korean with them the entire
Which
time.
I'm sure
so I
they
was like-
loved at that point.
Right, and so that's where Honor was just like, whoa, like, we have a guy who speaks Korean, who's a fan of our team, who came to watch us play, although it's not a spectator event. So I just had a quick chat with them, and Honor was like, listen, I want to, I want to thank you for, like, coming on and supporting us, and also you speak Korean and English, so it'd be cool to just hang out with you. And he was like, let me see if I can talk to the MLG guys to kind of maybe help you get inside. So I was like, all right, but that day, the first day was almost over anyway, so I'm just waiting outside. The whole first day wraps up. I meet TSM, I meet Curse. That's the first time I met any of the casters, like D-Man, Quickshot, Dan Din, of course, was still casting quite often back then. Got to meet all of those guys. And then a lot of MLG personnel, of course, wrapped up the studio, and they came downstairs, and they see what I'm doing. They're like, so I remember at the time I had no idea what Sundance even looked like. And then one of the guys is like, well, okay, well, Sundance, is kind of head of MLG. You should just tweet to him. You should tweet him and be like, listen, man, like, I'm here for the whole Dr. Pepper Ultimate fan thing. Like, I came to watch the arena, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, I've come this far. Why don't I just tweet the CEO of MLG and tell him that I'm just this fan who showed up at your doorstep to come watch teams play for a non-spectator event. So I tweet him, and they're like, all right, well, maybe. So a lot of the guys were saying, if you live nearby, you should drop by tomorrow anyway to see if maybe you can get in, and we'll see what we can do. And all the MLG guys were kind of bewildered too that someone would do this to, for the event, and also just to show up for an arena where there's no spectators. So I guess they were kind of impressed that I sat there sweating all day until like 1 a.m. just to catch, a glimpse of players and casters.
Early esports.
So,
This is great. Continue.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, great. Sounds good. So I go back home, edit my vlog really quick, upload it for the Dr. Pepper event, and then I go back to the MLG office the next day, and I'm just waiting downstairs at like a Starbucks, watching the games on my laptop, and then I see people come down, and they're like, all right, listen, we talked to like On Air, and we know that you were here yesterday. We'd like to invite you up to our office, just give you a tour, and you can hang out with us for the weekend. And I was like, all right, great. It's more than I wished for when I first set out. And that's where everything took off. I go upstairs, they give me a quick tour, and I'm just hanging out with like the players and casters. Of course, I'm super awkward at that point because I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here. Everyone else is like higher than me. I'm just gonna sit here awkwardly and watch these games.
But you're networking.
And then once. Yeah, so I was just like talking with people, and after about half a day, of course, everyone was talking about the games anyway, so we all kind of got used to each other. And then when the entire weekend wrapped up, um, I hadn't really talked with Monty the whole weekend. He, so I'm just gonna go ahead and I actually don't think I've ever told Monty this, but I was super intimidated by Monty when I first like met him in person in the
This
MLG
guy's like
office.
this big around.
so so I walk I see Monty, I'm like, oh, like he's pretty intimidating, and I'm sitting next to him
Yeah, he
while
had
watching
that
these
big
games.
ass ring on at the time, dude, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, he had the whole Monty look going. And I remember he asked me how the pillow interview was.
Oh god.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to tell him the full truth or like the half truth. I just lied to him. I was like, I think it was okay. And he was just like, I don't know. And then he just like walks out of the room. And I was like, yeah, I don't know either. But that was like the first conversation we had was about his pillow interview. And I half lied to him. So there we go. So that was, but once the weekend was over, I was going around making sure I made the best of it. So networking, taking pictures with people, and I was talking with Monty at that point, and then Monty realized that I was bilingual, and he obviously saw me doing some crazy stuff to just get into the MLG office. So he was just like, "All right, well, if you're interested in, are you here because you're interested in working in esports?" And I had told everyone that weekend that I was, I wished to be a caster, or at least try my hand at it. So, I just told him the same thing, and he said, all right, well, if you're interested in writing, I can see that you translate well in both languages, so why don't you contact me? And then he explained to me what GG Chronicle was, and he was like, all right, well, I have this website, GG Chronicle. We're just trying to keep up with, top tier coverage of League of Legends esports, especially because League is taking off right now. And he gave me the whole thing. Of course, that's when League was going more global simultaneously, so it all worked out. He was like, that way, you could cover the Korean teams if you want. I think that'd be great for your expertise. So he gave me some tips at the same time. So I was like, all right. So I got his contact information. Then I weaseled my way into the after dinner for Azubu Blaze, who had just won the tournament, and MLG, because I was like, all right, well, guys,
One is such a polite way of saying what happened.
well,
So moral of the story is be the creepy stalker fan, and you're gonna go play.
Drinks Dr. Pepper.
You have to be, though. You have to be crazy.
Yeah.
You can't worry about how you're gonna seem. So I actually wasn't sure if I wanted to do this, but then finally I was helping them do paperwork anyway, because they were like, all right, well, you can translate. There's 5 players we need to take care of. Can you help with all this stuff? Of course, at the time they had Slasher's girlfriend translating on the show, but to do paperwork for 5 people and stuff, they were like, well, you're here, might as well. Can you help us out? And I was like, sure, anything to help. And since I had helped them do paperwork anyway, I was like, so if you guys are gonna go to dinner with a Super Blaze, like they're gonna need a translator to communicate with you guys. Could I
Nice.
join? And that's exactly how I said it. You're
Well
super
said.
awkward. I'm like, could I join maybe? And they were like, they just look at me and they go, sure. Why not? You've been here the whole weekend. You can indeed help us communicate. So I got to go have dinner and just set up conversation for On Air and the MLG guys. Of course, On Air had done broadcasting himself before, so there was a lot of fun to talk about. And that was where everything took off. So a weekend of being a creepy stalker fan.
I mean, fanaticism is the word.
That's
and weaseling myself into
that's an awesome
various
story because
situations.
No, it's a great story.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean it
it's
worked
not like,
out.
it
Right?
just fell into your lap. You had to work for it, and
Yeah,
and it worked out.
that's something I definitely treasure. I believe that's helped my mentality
Right.
so far, where I know a cliche way to put it is I know my roots. I know that I was that fan. I was the same as all the spectators who are watching now. Same as the people who you'll see on Reddit who are like, I want to work for esports. What can I do? I'm doing whatever I can. People who do fan art, anything that is out of the norm. I look at that and I say, I've been there. I know what it's like. So it really helps me keep perspective. You know, I don't sit here. I'm like, yeah, I'm making those esports dollars at OGN better than everyone. Like,
Right.
it never
Yeah,
occurs to me that way because of that story, that one weekend. I just know that that's how everything took off for me. Of course, from there, I was very fortunate. I think, I believe I was at the right place at the right time many times in a row to have, I guess, helped with the process. If you think about it, compared to a lot of people who are involved in esports, especially in Korea, I'm just a complete newbie in terms of history. Even Monty, right? He casted Warcraft 3 and then he coached Warcraft 3 on and on, so forth. Of course, the casters in Korea have been around for 10 years plus. And then here's me, been around for 2 years, you know, just enjoying life. And that helps too when I look around and I look at all these people. I've always been fans of them. They tell me about esports back in 2003, and I'm like, I had never even thought about working in esports in 2003.
Were
So
you even old enough to work in esports 2003?
probably not. There you go. Yeah, I'm also just younger than most people who work in the industry. So
I was gonna say because I was 17 in 2003, and I'm fairly certain you're a few years younger than I am.
yes, how old was I in 2003? I was 14, I believe.
Okay, I was gonna say I thought you were about 25 or 26 right now.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So turning 25 this year. So that's where things took off. I got in touch with Monty, and I did end up winning the whole Dr. Pepper event for MLG Rally. So Monty was like, great, works out that you already have flights to Rally. You're on board for GG Chronicles, so you want to just do some interviews while you're at Rally? And I said, sure, you know, do what I can. I look back now, and those interviews make me laugh because, of course, it was my first esports interviews. At that time, I hadn't really owned it, so to speak, where I didn't feel as comfortable with the players. I was still a fan.
Sure.
I guess it's the easiest way to put it. So,
gotta
In your defense here, you know, like I just think back to interviews that were going on at the time, and it was in such a like rough spot comparatively. Like anybody doing interviews, they had no idea what they were doing. People were basically just making things up on the fly. They would like write notes on their phone and maybe would get to it in an interview. But a lot of them just had a lot of, you know, non sequiturs and that type of thing. Just a lot of nonsense really went on in the interviews because people didn't know what to ask.
Well, we used to give Monty shit for it too because he'd be sitting there. He was with like Brandon Beck doing this, looking at his phone as Brandon's talking, and we're like, and I'm like, Monty, why are you looking at your phone? He's like, I have notes on it. Like I'm trying to get my next question.
You got to memorize it, man.
yeah. So
Yeah, Shock's
it
got
was
a lot
fun.
of hell for that for a little while.
Oh yeah, I mean it was rough for everyone at the beginning.
Yeah,
'cause,
it
like
was-
you said, there wasn't a standard, there wasn't experience.
It's so funny because we've been doing the podcast for 2 years, just about the time that GG Chronicles started and done it. We started doing the podcast in there, and it was pretty much the same thing. It was people going in here and just trying to figure out how to make it happen. And you sound like the story is the same. How do I make this happen? What do I need to learn? And you fall on your face a couple times. I mean, I'll admit it.
Naturally.
We did the first GG Classic, and I was drunk when I was interviewing Dyrus and Dan Din for the GG Classic. Like, I learned from that point, don't get drunk during interviews. It's a really bad idea, But not something that you're going to walk out there and do in front of the camera. But we all learn from it, and that's how esports is going to grow. That's how all sports are going to grow.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely learned a lot from that weekend. I reviewed my interviews, talked with Monty a ton because, of course, Monty had more experience in that regard, and just watched other people's interviews from the same event. Did they ask similar questions? Whose interview stands out? And from there, MLG Rally, and then, like you said, I did get a chance to go to Worlds for GG Chronicle. We did the whole 12 days of esports idea, so I got a chance to really cover the Korean teams that I've followed and enjoyed watching for so long. Of course, I had the advantage of being able to...
I said, don't bring up the 12 days of esports. Every time you say that, Dom cringes a little bit. Like, I see the twitch in his eye.
Yeah, that was...
that was...
that was 12 actual days for me. Everybody...
That's true, yeah. So
that was a lot of work.
For me, it was just I just had to cover 2 days.
It was pretty much me. I wrote my article and I sat with them one night as we went through it line by line and fixed it. But they had to do that. They did that for 12 days, and I didn't.
Oh yeah. And I had it I also had to write an article on top of that. At least Tristan didn't. He didn't do any writing.
Yeah, it was crazy, especially for you guys. I remember it was just so hard to schedule times with the editors because everyone was just scrambling to finish their articles because we wanted to keep on schedule, of course. It was fun though. I don't know. I
Oh
thought
no, it
fun.
was like I look back on it fondly until I really start thinking about what happened. Then I'm like, okay, I can't do that ever again in my life. That was we need new, better ways of handling editing.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Again,
would
growing
agree. I would
pains with
agree
the
on that.
website and everything.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
So
go ahead.
yeah,
if you
so
wanna
I got
finish
to
it.
go to Worlds, and then I think that's where a lot of people really first got to know me because I had a chance to really show off my talent in terms of interviewing and translating on the fly, and of course there weren't many translators or interpreters present at Worlds for the Korean teams, and so I just kind of had my own show, so to speak. You know, I was free to ask my own questions in my own tone. I could do follow-up questions on the fly because I can understand both languages, and that's where a lot of people started to realize who I was, both in NA and in Korea. And from there, I think the story goes that Monty was hired by OGN to commentate. I took Monty's spot at MLG to commentate at MLG for League of Legends. And then I got hired by OGN to come out as a part-time caster and translator slash producer. And that's where, you know, my workload of last year got really complicated because it wasn't very clear-cut on what I was going to do. But I think it was good that way. So that's kind of the whole road.
That's funny.
That's awesome.
I thought this was gonna be like 5 minutes of how I got in here, and it's been 30 minutes of how Chobra
Yeah,
got into
my
esports.
story is pretty long.
It's a good story though, and
It
like
is.
because
No, it
the
is.
reality is there are so many people out there who like express interest in getting into esports and everything, and
Right.
like the reality is you have to work. Like you have to be
Yeah.
willing to put in a lot of your free time, a lot of energy,
yeah.
and a lot of effort. And
You got
like even
you got to
you know, even-
weasel your way in there like you did.
yeah, I mean, and even guys like Monty's been doing esports stuff for like 10 years. There was nothing overnight about Monty's success. You know,
Wow.
so I definitely encourage anybody who's interested in doing esports stuff to really, you know, take your best shot at it and really put in the effort, but like don't think anything is just going to happen overnight because you really do have to work at it.
Am I allowed to
What
plug
I
that
take
we're
from
looking
this
for-
story is that networking is key. Get out there face to face with the people in the scene and try to buddy with them. And
That's the only problem with
what
esports
happens.
is it's hard when you live in, you know, Kentucky and everything happens over
Right.
in California.
Right,
Like
right.
it's really hard to get out there.
Sorta. I mean, the other side is that it's an entirely digital sport. And so in that regard, everything is done online and you can stay connected with everybody even from the comfort or discomfort of your own home, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say while we're talking about this, I do want to throw out there that like the LCS rundown, for example, we're still looking for a fourth caster. So like if you have that, you know, if you want to get your foot in there, you know, we are looking for a fourth person.
Let's clear.
Not to
It's the
take over
LCS rundown. It's not the Trinity Force podcast proper.
Right. We've had a number of people write in for us. So, Cho, I'm sure you've seen it. We do the T-Force LCS rundown where we're running, like I
Right.
talked about in the beginning. But we are looking for a fourth caster for that, and that's like the perfect time for you to get your foot in there and learn. Sure, you're casting with Optimus Tom, who has his roots in MLG, and he has a similar story to what Cho has going.
Yep. And I got to cast with Tom, of course, at MLG. Those were fun times.
Yep.
Short-lived, but fun times. So I agree with, you know, all of you guys saying that you can't expect it to go overnight. And I think what I learned from this is something I learned when I was doing research actually back in school. When I had an internship at a research center here in Korea, actually. You can't. I guess I discourage people from constantly asking on how other people got into esports or into whatever field. Just because what I noticed when I was doing research and also for esports was that the more you ask, the more you read about, the more you kind of box yourself in. Because then you set what the stories you heard as the standard, and then you try to work from that route. Where if you do it that way, you'll never be as unique as you
Right.
potentially could be when you have your own base. So that's my 2 cents. I think that's what helped with me was, I don't think we've heard of someone drinking Dr. Pepper and vlogging themselves to go to MLG. I had never thought about doing it. Of course, the
Getting
idea of
self-diabetes.
vlogging. Yeah, exactly. The idea of vlogging and stuff I've heard from other events and such, but those are mediums you just learn about by living in the 21st century culture we have today. It's not because I heard of someone else's anecdote, someone else's story and experience.
Right.
So yeah,
That is an inspiring story. I like that.
Are you inspired to quit your day
Glad.
job and pursue a esports career?
Adam.
Quad?
I love it, Adam. See? He's relentless. He's taking a page from your book there.
there you go.
I don't even know what to say
So-
after that long conversation.
So I got a question for you.
Right on.
Olaf has that Broloff skin. If
Jesus
Cho'Gath had a
Christ.
similar skin, would it be Chobra?
Oh my God! I
Or is that a brassiere
can't
that he-
believe that just happened.
Had a transgender skin. I don't know. Is there any inspiration there?
This is the hardest Cho's laugh before 10 a.m. in weeks.
It's true.
This is the most he's spoken before 10 a.m.
Let's just get this out of the way that my name, just so we're clear. I do get a
Okay.
lot of questions from this, especially in Korea, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So this name, I used to have a different ID I worked with, which I'm gonna say it, but I'm
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at
I'm
you.
gonna
just-
doubt it. So I'm gonna regret this. But so my ID before, when I was playing amateur Call of Duty, was Chocoho. Now it's not what it sounds like. All right, let's just be clear that it was
Wait,
spelled
Chocoho?
Give me 1 second. I can't believe I'm doing this. All right.
No, I can't keep going.
All right, so it's spelled Chocoho, like a chocobo, Final Fantasy, but with an H, because my last name was Cho. And then you just play around with the letters. All right, I didn't really put much thought into it because I never read it out loud until I started gaming, like doing amateur esports. Because before it was just, an ID me and my friends came up with, and we're like, all right, this is great. But it wasn't so great when I started saying it out loud because I'd go into TeamSpeak and I'd introduce myself and they'd be like, so how do you spell your name? And I'd be like, oh, right. Yeah, I'd have to type it out for everyone. So that was my ID before. I actually had never really considered changing it, but switching from team to team and, of course, how you say it out loud wasn't the greatest for branding myself. So I was talking with my teammate back at the time, and we were just like, I want a new ID, and it just happened, we're playing Call of Duty. There's, some choppers, of course, are fondly called Cobras. So I was like, all right, great. Cobra, added an H, Chobra. That's where my name comes from. Now in Korean, it's not as apparent. I guess that similarity between Chobra and Cobra is not apparent because the first syllable is spelled completely different. So it just looks as if it's the first syllable Cho and then Bra separately.
Okay.
But of course, when you write anything in Korean, you break up all the syllables. So then it literally looks like
Of
it's
course,
a Cho
we would know
Bra.
that. Of course.
Yeah, I
he
know.
says I'm good.
So that's the closest.
So
translation.
everyone just sits there and they're like, is there any innuendo in your name? And I'm like, no, not at all. And then I have to run through the whole English portion of it, and then they finally understand in Korea.
It is way more PC than Chocoho.
Chocoho.
You know,
Can I call this
it-
week's episode Chocoho?
you can run with it if you want. I put it out.
You know what?
there.
That reminds me
There's no
because
going back.
Oh, that's so good.
one of my coworkers at my old job, packing point of sale equipment, he put in the order to pick from the warehouse. He had a limited space, so he needed to abbreviate Wants Company Check. So he put Wants CO for company, CK for check. I didn't realize, and it went out to the customer. Oh man, that reminds me of that. You don't realize they're like, oh.
Wow. Yeah. You really got to think these things through.
Yeah.
Read them out loud and
I like Choco.
3 times and 4 times. So
Oh, you guys are making this
There's-
difficult to host. I'm not gonna lie.
But Riot, please, Brocho. Chobra.
Chobra,
see
the
it.
Chobra skin. I'd be okay with that. Yeah.
Chobro skin.
Okay, let's take a deep breath here because I have a few questions I actually want to talk about some of the Korean teams and what you know about them before we wrap this up.
There we go.
Okay, so we have seen the difference between NA, EU, and Korean solo queue, or what people have talked about, and you've definitely had your chance to play in Korean solo queue. And this is going to bring me into SK Telecom T1. K is the parent team, right? I got that right. I don't know S's background, but the primary team is mostly made up of, or if not all, made up of solo queue players, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is true.
Now I don't know a lot of the background about the Korean teams, so you can help me fill in here. But while we were talking about this, a lot of the players in NA and EU don't seem to take solo queue as seriously as they should. Now, how does Korean solo queue translate between NA and EU, and how do the players play that?
I think any region, solo queue, of course, can't be your main form of practice. The biggest thing that people will realize if you've played on Korean solo queue is the reason the players here can take advantage of solo queue as a, I guess, training field is because even the players who are not pros take it more seriously. I think that sets a huge difference on just the environment. Of course, even in NA and EU, we see people following the meta. They use the similar picks that are popular right now in the pro scene. They use similar builds. They learn from the pros. It's all the true and the same, but there's that unique competitive nature that just gets fired up in Koreans when they play games, like more so than anything else they do. Like Koreans sit in front of a computer and suddenly they're the most competitive people you've seen. And this just shows through in solo queue where people, in some ways, I know a lot of people who have played on both servers or various servers feel that Korean players give up too easily. And that's because to Koreans, it's like, all right, well, if we've given up this many kills this early, like we're not coming back, because they play with the mentality that we're on the same playing field. So if it's two equal teams playing of solo queue players and we're this behind by 20 minutes, why play this out?
Right, cost benefit,
Exactly.
time, all that.
We had a similar discussion a few weeks ago. That's pretty much how I'm playing the game. Is if I'm behind by 12 kills, but I'm just gonna give it up, move on to my next game.
Right on. So that's how a lot of the Koreans play, because Koreans in any game, they grind out games more than in most cultures. So here, of course, we have certain pros or certain solo queue warriors, as Koreans like to call them, climb by just having ridiculous win rates. But a lot of people climb by just grinding out game after game, and therefore the whole time efficiency takes I guess a bigger place in Korea than some other servers. So you get that, and then of course you go into the top tier. These players are all at similar levels with the pros. Of course, some people maybe it only applies to their solo queue skill. Some people maybe they're not pros because they don't have the time, or it's just not their dream to become one. But you start playing with that, and it's just and then from then on, it's a snowball effect, same as the professional scene, where if you have the best players in that serious environment of solo queue that play with each other, it's just going to grow on its own. And that applies to the professional scene. You have SKT T1K, the reigning world champions. You have teams like CJ Frost and Blaze who have the history. You have these teams pitted against each other with this region lock the whole time. They're going to continue to grow at their own rate, whereas we're seeing now NA and EU LCS teams have to learn to first create that environment for themselves. We're seeing more teams take scrims more seriously, schedule scrims more often with a variety of teams. Some teams are starting to now in NA and EU not share their scrim results because to them that's just kind of statistics they want to keep to themselves. This has all been around in Korea through other games and other titles for many years, 10 plus years in the past. And so you could say Korea had a head start, and therefore the regular just people who just enjoy the game also, in a sense, had a head start with quotation marks in how they look at the game. And that helps professional players take advantage of that field of practicing mechanics, testing out new champions, because you can always rely on your opponent being in a similar level as you, and you're not going to meet as many trolls. There are trolls in Korea too, and some probably worse than other regions, because of course the average user takes it more seriously, and therefore the level of trolling also becomes more extreme.
It has more,
and that's just the nature of, that's just the nature of online gaming. But I think that's the biggest point. I think that's why teams are able to do that. And like you said, T1K, a good example of if you pick out the right talent from solo queue, you can definitely make a top tier team.
Now
That's
with
some good insight and way to look at it.
with that insight, T1K, primarily solo queue team, do you feel that those teams compared to NA or EU, because they take solo queue more seriously and they play solo queue, they're grinding out, that they can adapt more quickly than some of the other players, or they have a better or higher chance of adapting more quickly because they have to be ready to, be competitive in solo queue and be competitive with the new patches?
Yeah, I would say it matters. I would say it affects them a lot. So when I've spoken with some coaches who have had chances to take their teams to international events, that's actually their biggest qualm, is that you're usually on a different patch, and then of course you have to adjust to the global meta, which you can't do as well because you can't play on their servers until you get there. Then the problem is they come back to Korea for after a week, 2 weeks, not having played on the Korean server, so you're not sure what other players have figured out anymore. And it's not even because in scrims you can't trust it 100%, right? Because oftentimes it's still an opponent unless you scrim in-house, and therefore you can't always trust that they're going to show you everything they've figured out about the game so far. So then you have to play in solo queue to see what other non-pros are doing, or what pros are doing in solo queue, maybe for fun. And a lot of coaches have felt that that has set them behind and resulted in a lot of losses they didn't deserve, such as a lot of coaches that are not from SKT. So I didn't get to talk to Koma about this instance, but a lot of teams that looked at the loss that T1K had after Worlds against Samsung Blue, who had been playing in Korea the whole time during Worlds for the WCG qualifiers, credited to that. It's, of course, Blue has good players, but the reason Blue could beat them so soundly is because T1K had no idea what the norm was anymore, especially in the Korean scene. And so they were kind of playing on the safest way they learned from Worlds, at an international level, which doesn't always apply to each region. So I would say yes, it matters a lot. And I know that Koma also takes advantage of this very much, where he watches and plays a lot of solo queue, and that's where he will pick up ideas for new champions, new item builds, and then relay that to his players, will then, of course, expand on it and practice it.
So, All-Stars, SKT1K is going to the All-Star event, right? Or they are slated to go to the All-Star event based on circuit points?
I believe Monty's correct in the calculation where, yes, no one can really take them over.
Right, they're at 400 or something circuit points, and Ozone is the next highest with like 250, I think it is. It's something like that. They're like 150, 200 circuit points behind T1.
Exactly.
So no matter what happens, T1 goes to
going.
Worlds. Now, with that said, T1 just... Okay, spoiler alert for anybody who didn't watch this morning. T1 got served their first loss this morning in 6 months, I think it is.
Yeah, it's been a while.
to their brother team S, to T1S. So it's been about 5 or 6 months, and K finally lost. Now, if K goes off to this All-Star event, and they're playing on it'd probably be 4-3 what they'll be playing on, if not 4-4, depending on the time.
When is All-Star?
The voting is March, so I think it's in sometime in April.
All Stars itself will be starting on May 8th, I believe.
Okay, so it's
it seems statistically probable that they'll be on 4-4.
Right.
Yeah, it's Thursday, May 8th to Sunday, May 11th.
Now, with that said, and them going out there, do you feel like this is going to have an impact on Masters and Champions when SK comes back, having played that week or that weekend in on 4-4 and playing it against the international level, like we had just spoken of? As a team, do you feel like they're going to come back and have a rougher time, and we could potentially see 2 or 3 losses out of them because of that?
I think it's potential. Yeah, there's potential for it. We'll put it that way. Of course, T1K, a top tier team. Right. So
I don't expect you to be a genie and rub the lamp and say it. But from your freshman level and watching, be able to watch
shake the magic 8-ball.
Yeah.
I would say there's much more potential than, say, in other seasons where there wouldn't be an international event in the middle of Champions and Masters. Just because I know for a fact that the other team's coaches will take this chance as a huge advantage, and they'll train like crazy to develop or continue developing the Korean meta, even if it's just 1 week. Game changes so fast. I think we all know that by now, and
Innovate
so
something different.
exactly they'll try to do that. Also, what we've seen, I don't know if this will be the case for T1K necessarily because they're so strong at the moment, but what we saw last year in Champions Winter from 012 to 13 was CJ, Frost, and Blaze went over to IEM. That's kind of the famous win of Gambit beating both the CJ teams to become the IEM champions. And then they came back. Frost comes back. Sword uses the same strategy that Gambit used against Frost and wins the champions final 3-0. And so Sword kind of took advantage of the fact
It was
that
backwards.
Gambit just they just showed Gambit just showed the world how to beat the CJ teams. And so Sword took advantage of that, and CJ just didn't have time to learn from that experience and adapt because they're busy coming back, adjusting back to the Korean meta, scrimming with Korean teams. So that's very well a possibility. Of course, if T1K wins and just with very safe strategies, then they won't show much of their hand. But if they do take a loss or two, or if they bring up something new just to beat teams from other regions, then I think a lot of the other Korean teams can learn from that. So we'll see. I think it'll be interesting.
All right, fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about Champions now. Champions had just started. Starts tomorrow or today for you, I guess, right? Because today for us is the 12th.
So Champions started yesterday, a couple hours ago.
Yeah, see, I get confused.
It's all crazy. Yes. So Champions just started.
And you are casting alongside Monty during that as the play-by-play caster, correct? Do I got that right?
No, I'm casting Masters.
Masters. Okay, that's right. Sorry, I have it wrong in the document. Dowo is doing Champions.
It gets confusing, yeah.
I mean, I know you had to explain to me earlier, but when I'm reading the document and you going back, anyway, so Masters is starting up here, and you are casting with Monty today for Masters, correct?
Yes.
Got that. Okay. So most anticipated match coming up this week?
Well, this week, we had a disappointing run-in of Janair against SKT, which didn't end well for Janair. It's hard to say most anticipated match just because it's just a one-time round robin, so each organization will only play against each other once. I have to say though, I think I'm most looking forward to CJ versus KT. There's a lot of reasons for this. For one, I'm a CJ fan and Monty's a KT fan, so that creates for a lot of fun discussion.
All right.
Well, that's good banter.
Yeah, and then the other is, of course, Blaze and Bullets have had a long-running rivalry, which may change a lot now that both teams have changed, and a lot of people are saying the Bullets look a lot weaker than they used to, while Blaze looks a lot stronger. Frost also just went through huge changes, and so did Arrow, and Arrows seem to be overtaking the Bullets as the leading team in the KT organization. So I think it just sets up for a lot of interesting potential games out of the three. I also think that, if we do see mixed rosters, it could be the most intense from both teams just because of the talent lineup they have. This is all, we're just going to not count SKT in all of this because obviously they're the world champions, all of that. So, yeah, I think that's the one I'm looking forward to the most. I know the Najin teams have gotten better. It's really hard to choose because also so many teams have gone through rebuilding just recently, so tons of roster changes. But CJ versus KT, putting my bet on that.
Good. I'm going to leave this open for the other two guys. Questions, comments, Dom to Claude?
I mean, we have a listener question that could be actually more relevant if asked with Chobra on the air than if Chiro was around.
Good catch. Let's ask it.
I know that we've gone overboard here, so it's up to you, Adam.
No, let's do it. I'm
Sure.
willing to let this go a little bit longer.
All right. I'll copy it into the doc, and then I guess I'll read it out too. So Vesp QT writes, I'm a big lover of esports, but I'm frustrated by how small the scene is here in Australia. What do you think made esports what it is today in places like Korea, Europe, or North America? And what advice would you give to Riot to grow the very small scene we have here in Oceania? Oceania?
Oceanic.
Yeah.
Oceania?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
There we go.
So our Oz LOL brothers and their Oceanic
Right.
podcast.
Right.
You, of course, ton of factors, but all right. So in Korea, I've said this. I've said in some other interviews too. But I think the biggest thing is the gaming culture itself is just very different. For instance, console gaming doesn't really exist in Korea. They sell consoles. I know people who have them, but it's actually more for solo use, not even for online. So it's for solo RPGs or sports games.
Hey, same way I use my console.
There you
I
go.
use mine too, yeah.
That's the main use for consoles out here in Korea because of the PC gaming culture, because of the PC cafes. In Korea and probably China too, Taiwan is unique because of the PC cafes, where this is the go-to place for kids to hang out. You don't finish school and go to Starbucks. You finish school and go to the PC cafe. You don't finish school and go play soccer. You finish school and go to the PC cafe. And you definitely don't go hang out at a friend's house as often as you might think. That's just culturally very different. I know, in the U.S. it's always like, oh, well, let's go hang out. We'll play in your backyard, etc. Korea, you don't see that as often. So therefore, it's not in the living room. You go to these other places, and you have PC cafes, cheap, affordable for students starting from middle school and onward, and you can play all these games. Of course, Korea has a ton of free-to-play online games, and so it all works out. That has helped set up, I think, the notion of esports to begin with here in Korea, and then of course there are the factors such as great internet, and then some visionaries such as
the infrastructure in Korea.
Yeah.
Is just fantastic.
Yeah,
as I've heard.
I mean, part of it is really just that esports has been around in Korea for so much longer than it has
Exactly,
anywhere
yeah.
else. And
that's a unique difference.
From the 90s with StarCraft, starting with
Yeah.
when StarCraft 98, I think it was.
Yeah, 98,
97.
I mean, and
Okay.
like that to a degree is what gives Korea the big leg up that they have over the other regions. But I mean, I think that's just the reality for Oceania. It's that they're so new to if my perception is correct, I can't pretend to know really the history of esports in Australia, but if my perception is correct, because it's so new there, it's just going to take time for things to really ramp up and get going, and fans are really just going to have to stick with it.
I've noticed it's growing, though. I'm seeing
Oh,
more
yeah,
and
it's
more
definitely growing.
interest in the oceanic scene. And so is Riot. Riot's putting some more time and interest into it, obviously, too. So I think it'll grow. I think it'll grow pretty
I think it's on
substantially.
the right track. I do believe that from what I've heard and seen, for instance, a keynote is just internet accessibility, high-speed internet accessibility for everyone around the region is not definitely not as much as Korea, but even the U.S. has definitely ramped that up in the past couple of years. It's helped with esports. Yeah, the technical infrastructure, I think, needs to be there first. I think, like you said, DeClaude, the interest is there. It's growing, both from Riot and the community. But at this point, like both of you guys have said, you just need to give it time so that the tech infrastructure now catches up to the interest.
Catch up, yeah. Yeah, because right now their tech infrastructure in Australia is down under the rest of us. So once they rise, it'll be better.
Yeah, I think once that improves, it'll just be natural growth for everyone out there. Of course, there is that aspect that because the region's so distant from other regions, it's hard to say scrim or even things like that, even while taking into paying into account and such. Like Korean teams scrim with Chinese teams all the time, and we've seen NA teams who used to be on the East Coast scrim with EU teams. Of course, now that's not true anymore because everyone moved out to the West Coast. But we see these differences, whereas it's kind of hard to do that when you're out in Oceania.
Well, and part of that was the location of Riot's servers and everything. But they're trying to get stuff open on the East Coast. Monty actually brought this up a while ago in one of his Machinima interview, whatever thing, his shows there. I think it'd be really cool if there were like East and West Coast teams in North America, and then like you have your national level all-star event, and then the international level, all that type of stuff. And I just think there's a lot of opportunity for some like really cool national level type things going on if that infrastructure gets put in place. But it's doesn't exist right now, so everybody's on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. But again, all this will take some time. Of course, there are still some kinks to work out in the current infrastructure. So once that gets fixed, I actually think that's brilliant. Especially just because that's what makes any sport in the U.S. unique.
Right.
That you can't have this East-West divide. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that'd
yep.
be really neat in esports too.
I want a Midwest team.
Of course you do.
I want another beer,
yeah, I
but
do.
we're over 9 o'clock and I can't go get one. So
Oh,
No, I think it looks. I mean, I do think the future is for esports in Australia is promising. I mean, like they had a PAX
Yeah.
event there, in
Exactly.
2012. That suggests there's a very thriving gaming community, and esports is really just a logical extension of that.
I'm just happy
so-
that we've had so many people write in or email or tweet or whatever it may be, not specifically at us, but just sending the information out there that they are willing to put in the time and the effort to make a scene. Because
Yeah.
it's hard to do that. It's hard to get like a local scene. For example, here in Cincinnati, it's very hard to get a scene going for Street Fighter, and fighting game community has been out there for quite a while, and to find clubs to do that. So people that are willing to put the time in there and willing to get the word out is something that the scene needs, and it'll continue to grow as you do it and more people talk about it.
and listen to the Oslal podcast because I'm sure they're going to have the information right as it comes out, as it's growing. They're going
right.
to be growing, and they're going to be telling everybody. So
Part of the Trinity Force Podcast Network, ozlol.trinityforcepodcast.com. Look
Yep.
at us. We got it all taken care of for you guys.
There you go.
So
nice.
I think that'll do it for this interview. I'll call it interview. I'll call it just having fun talking with Cho.
Story
That's
time.
required. We'll let you get back to sleep before you're casting games tonight.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking a nap before I go.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Thanks,
there you
Cho,
go.
for
Me
joining.
too.
Do you want to
Yeah,
tell
thanks for
anybody?
coming in.
Tell anybody anything? Where to find you? What time you be casting?
Any
Sure.
shout outs?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. So, you can my Twitter, of course, is Will Chobra. So it's just
on the
Will
screen.
Cho.
Wait,
Yeah,
he's
Will
down
Chobra.
here.
Yes, it's right here. I see that. So at Will Chobra on Twitter. I haven't really gotten around to using Facebook yet, but I also blog now and then for any esports stuff. I guess you could say it's a bi-weekly blog. That's willchobra.tumblr.com. And then, of course, you'll just find me on the OGN broadcast now and then, at least twice a week. So that's twitch.tv/OnGameNet. And then now that I've finally got my graphics card, I actually just got my new graphics card yesterday, and this webcam, actually.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I'll start streaming again soon, too. So that'll be
Oh,
at
cool.
/ChobraLOL on Twitch. So that's where you can find me. I think this... I don't know if I feel I haven't thanked Monty enough times, just because
Oh,
I think
don't make his ego
Yeah,
any bigger than it
don't-
already
yeah,
is.
I know,
Huge.
I know,
It's
I
so
know
big.
that I know it's big. I know it's big, but
That's what she said.
exactly. I was waiting for that. Personally, just my story wise, I owe a lot to him. So I want to give a big thanks to Monty. Take this time to give a shout out to him, and also want to give a shout out to two guys who I've actually known since my amateur Call of Duty days, Dark Nevra and Apostle. If you guys hear this at some point, which I hope you will. Dark Nevra is actually the one who helped me rename myself to Chobra so that it's a little bit more PC. So there you go. Those
Well,
two
thank
guys
you
have
very much. We
supported me
appreciate that one.
throughout. And,
All right.
shout out to all the fans, of course, who keep up with all of the esports.
Man, I wanted to
in
ask you
Korea.
about the fans, the Korean fans, and everything, and we're already.
I took up so much time. Sorry. My
Well,
story
quickly, are the
was
Korean
too
fans?
long.
Is it pretty awesome? Like the Korean fans, and like
it is pretty awesome.
Are they? Is it like fangirls? Is that kind of what? Do you have a bunch of fangirls?
No, I don't.
Damn it! I was really
I
hoping
do not.
you had the final.
But I know players do, and I know Monty and Doa get a lot of fans, both girls and guys.
Oh, that's-
Fans are very active and very just enthusiastic when they show up.
Yeah, Monty was telling me. I was on Skype with him 2 or 3 nights ago, and he was eating some food from a basket that he got from a bunch of fans. They made him a food
Yeah.
basket. So he
Yeah.
was eating
That's
like
awesome.
rice cakes for breakfast. Anyway, thanks for joining us this week, Joe. Thanks, guys, for listening to Trinity Force Podcast. Don't forget to check us out at trinityforcepodcast.com. Release every Wednesday and Friday. That's 2 times a week. The LCS podcast goes live on Sunday. And don't forget to go check out the Oceanic scene at ozlol.trinityforcepodcast.com. So that's episode 143. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
And remember, our fans will beat everybody else's fans in a bar fight, as brought up in the Twitch chat.
That's probably true.
That's all right. All right, see you guys.
All right, bye.